What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the first top 10 positional breakdown video for the 2023 NFL Draft with the wide receiver group. I will say, make sure you are subscribed. Come March, I'm going to have a brief updated version of this video. I've been diving into the film, and these evaluations aren't going to change a whole lot, but after the combine and a little bit more draft process here, there's sure to be some tweaks and realignment of these rankings and maybe a chance to talk about some late risers and other receivers that didn't quite crack the top 10. And then before we dive in, if you could do me a huge favor and just take a second to hit that like button down below. It is a free and easy way to support my channel. Tells YouTube to push this video out to other NFL draft enthusiasts and bring more people to the channel. Really helps me out. Thank you in advance. But let's get started with the number 10 receiver in the 2023 NFL Draft, with one of several high risers from last week's Senior Bowl, where I got to see a lot of these guys routing corners up, making themselves a lot of money, and the first of which we're going to talk about here is Nathaniel Tank Dell. And with Tank Dell, the biggest compliment I'm going to give him is the same compliment I gave his defensive counterpart out of Houston last year, Marcus Jones, where I said he is so technically refined with such great instincts that if he were in a normal-sized body, he just might be the number one corner in this class. And I feel the same way about Nathaniel Tank Dell. Route running is exceptional, some of the best in this class. He has a clean set of releases with rapid foot speed. Yes, he's smaller, but he doesn't allow corners to jam him. He's got a nice hop step. He jukes guys. He redirects quickly and can get off of press coverage. Is he going to necessarily stack over the top vertically against elite perimeter corners in the NFL? I would say probably not, because you do see that size start to show up as a problem for him as he's running his routes down the field. If guys can bang with him down the field or get their hands on him, his routes will be easily redirected. He will be slowed down and loses momentum and can even be taken out of the route. So there are obvious limitations there with his size in that regard. Also, just from a catch radius, contested catch perspective, there's just not a whole lot there. This is a player that struggled with a lot of drops in his college career, 21 drops over his last 2 seasons. And I think some of that is smaller hands, all of that, but also he's just a smaller target. It increases the margin for error for the quarterback, whereas for a normal-sized receiver, they can extend their arms, they can elevate backwards, and have a larger catch radius. With Nathaniel Dell, what might be a normal catch for someone else is him having to lunge forward or leap backwards, and it might hit his hands, but the level of difficulty is just so much more there that he's going to end up dropping it. So he's not going to be an ultra reliable third down target that in a pinch the quarterback can put the ball up to him. No, that's not going to be his game. I do see him as probably more of a gadget receiver. I do think he has the upside to be a starter as one of 3 as a starting slot guy. But I compare him to Isaiah McKenzie, who has been a very impactful weapon for the Buffalo Bills. When Brian Daboll went to the New York Giants, he looked for his own version of that player by drafting Wan'Dale Robinson. So when it comes to Tank Dell, I want to see him with a coordinator that can do the best to get him in space, to manufacture touches for him and manufacture routes and free releases where he can work in space and ditch these cornerbacks like he did at the Senior Bowl, like he did on tape at Houston, where he led the nation in receiving yards this season. It's not that he doesn't have real receiver traits. I absolutely love his route running, his attention to detail, the foot speed, the snap in his routes. He will be able to separate against man coverage at the next level. It just might be a little bit more matchup dependent. So I like Tank Dell. Right now, I see him as a top 100 player in this draft. And if you are a creative coordinator that needs a bit of a mismatch problem, a gadget type that can really provide a spark to your offense, I could see him going in the second round. And I can certainly see him going in the second round if he comes out and runs like 4.30 at the combine. I think he's somewhere between that and like 4.4. He can absolutely run, but I don't know if he's got like elite speed either. And I would say he probably doesn't. But I really hope he works out. He's one of the most fun watches in this draft class, and anytime you got a guy that's an outlier size-wise like this, it definitely piques your interest to see if he can make it work at the next level. Then next up, we have a player that I'm really glad I watched this morning. He was the last guy I evaluated before I sat down to get ready for this video, and he cracked the top 10, and that is Parker Washington, the slot receiver out of Penn State. And I will just say, I don't think this is a player getting enough hype and conversation. And it's probably because he's not a super explosive, high upside player. But for all of the talk about Jackson Smith-Njigba, and I think Njigba is a little bit more explosive, which we'll talk about, but not terribly. I think if you miss out on Smith-Njigba and you need an impact starter in the slot, someone that can step in and be your starting slot wide receiver on day one, I think Parker Washington can be that guy. He's a very crafty player. He runs good routes with room to grow. He's still a young player. He's really tough after the catch. He's built like a running back. There were not a lot of easy comparisons for him at the NFL level. Just from a size perspective, Amari Rodgers made sense. I think I like Parker Washington a little bit more than I liked Amari Rodgers, but it's close. But anyway, he's got ultra reliable hands, very few drops on tape, and maybe his best trait, honestly, is how well he uses his thickness to go attack the football and brush off contact on those contested catch situations. Just like Jackson Smith-Njigba, Parker Washington, he's not 6'4", but he had one of the best contested catch percentages in college football in his time playing there. So I really like him as a player. I think third round is a very easy landing spot for him. Another player that he did remind me a lot of is actually Sterling Shepard for the New York Giants. He's just about 15, 20 pounds heavier, so I didn't want to put that as a comp, but I could see him becoming that kind of player as a good starting slot receiver in the NFL. So that's definitely worth a third round pick. Someone I would say go check him out. He got hurt at the end of his junior season and not someone that's getting a lot of talk right now. Before we get to number 8, I just want to say that we have a new merchandise option for draft season. Just sat down with my merch guy this week, put together this concept. It's draft season, baby. If you want to rep the brand, support the brand, take your passion for the NFL draft into the streets, and support my channel in the process, head over to thatfranchisestore.com and check out the options there. All right, number 8 is another Senior Bowl riser, Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. And Reed was really fun to watch, not just at the Senior Bowl, but to then go visit his tape and see what he was able to do in college. And let's face it, Michigan State did not have an explosive passing game in the time that he was there at Michigan State, and just not really fully allowed to utilize his best skill set. And yes, he runs good routes. Yes, he can play from the slot. Yes, he's good after the catch. I think that gives him a nice baseline as a prospect. But Jaden Reed was low-key one of the best vertical ball winners in all of college football, and he's fast and runs exceptional routes. He has a beautiful little hezzy step. If he is just running a straight line, he will just stop that back foot for a split second, enough to make the corner think he's going to turn and run a corner route or come inside on a inside dig route. No, he just hezzy steps and keeps going with full acceleration and leaves corners in the dust. So he is a polished route runner, super quick. He also has a really impressive release package, so you can't eliminate his vertical presence just by pressing him out of the play. He's going to keep you off of him at the line of scrimmage and has great acceleration to burn by guys deep with great foot speed and a variety of releases there at the line of scrimmage. So I'm really impressed by that aspect of Jaden Reed's game. Coming into the Senior Bowl, most people viewed him as a slot-only kind of guy, and I think that perception has greatly changed across the board. And it shows on tape when Michigan State actually decided to use him as a vertical threat. He was literally the most efficient deep ball receiver in all of football. And that brings me to his last very impressive trait, probably his best trait, and that's just his ability to track the deep ball, to show that body control, contort his body, and really fight through contact. He's not a twig. He can fight through contact and come down with really tough catches down the field. So he is a legitimate vertical threat, and at his size, it's almost impossible not to compare him to Tyler Lockett. Think about Tyler Lockett. Comes out, third-round pick, slot receiver out of Kansas State, but in the NFL, they say, hey, you put him with Russell Wilson and throw him a bunch of moon balls, he's actually really freaking good at tracking them and can make some really crazy concentration catches down the field. And that is Jaden Reed's skill set. I don't know if he's going to be as good as Tyler Lockett. That's why his low comp is Philip Dorsett. But I think there's a decent enough chance that you are getting Tyler Lockett in this player. So I was blown away by Jaden Reed at the Senior Bowl. I think his film did back it up. Even though his production wasn't necessarily there, he played at Michigan State. It's not an explosive passing game. So Jaden Reed, to me, a second-round prospect that can absolutely be a starting number 2 receiver in the NFL. And now our third riser from the Senior Bowl, who probably rose his stock more than anybody down there, and that is Michael Wilson out of Stanford. This is a player that's been banged up in his time at Stanford. Stanford, yes, they have a potential first-round quarterback prospect, but they don't throw the ball very well there. They haven't for a really long time. They're a ground and pound heavy offense, and it is tough for a guy like Michael Wilson to stand out in a lot of ways. Now, there were moments when they really featured Michael Wilson in their offense, and when they called his number, he delivered time and time again. But they just didn't call his number enough. So you head down to the Senior Bowl, and he was actually pushed pretty far down the list. This is a guy that's been injured. He hasn't produced at a high level. He's not a freak athlete, so just kind of getting buried a little bit. But gets healthy, gets removed from that Stanford situation, and shows up at the Senior Bowl and was the most dominant receiver all week long. Outside of maybe Nathaniel Dell, let's be honest. He was crushing dudes down there. But Michael Wilson was so impressive from his very first snap. He bursts off the line, shows a great release, snaps inside on a slant, and shows strong hands. And right out the gate, I was like, oh, okay, he's got a little something to him. And he just kept doing it all week long. It started with the short routes. Then he started working intermediate with hitches and comebacks. And then by the third day, you see him actually show a second gear, an ability to track the deep ball. There is a lot there in Michael Wilson. And he brings something in this class that, as we've already seen and as we're going to see as we continue to go here, he brings size at the position, which in this class is few and far between, let's be honest. So I like a lot of stuff about Michael Wilson's game. I compare him stylistically to Davante Adams, and obviously that is crazy high praise. He might be the best receiver in the NFL, but if you look at Davante Adams, a second-round pick, identical size, 6'1", 6'2", 215 pounds, with insane agility, foot speed, and a combination of releases to get off of press and sharpness in his routes. There are a ton of similarities to a young Davante Adams and Michael Wilson. Now, is Michael Wilson going to be a maniac worker like Davante Adams? That obviously is to be determined, but the skill set is there. It's something that we know can translate to the next level. I think he's got good hands, could be better, but also a super high character guy. I loved his interviews, and I just trust that he's going to be a good receiver at the next level. I really think his best football is ahead of him. I would take him in the second round, and I think he'll be a starter in the NFL before too long. Before we get to number 6, I want to have 2 quick honorable mentions that I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk about. It's going to be Raheem Jarrett out of Maryland. I think he's really raw. I think he has work to do in his routes. His ball skills are really a concern when it comes to contested catch percentage, which is borderline embarrassing for him. And just consistency with his hands. He developed a big drop issue in his final season at Maryland. Wasn't exactly surrounded by an incredible passing game at Maryland, so I think there's real excuses there. he's a 5-star prospect that committed to Maryland and surprised a lot of people. I do see the flashes, and the speed is incredible. He brings a physical profile that you're just not going to really find in a lot of receiver prospects. So I do like him. I'm intrigued by him. I think he's a 3rd-round player, but he didn't quite crack the top 10. And then the other guy is Keyshawn Butte out of LSU, who just on the field, he's got speed, he's big, he's got great body control and ball tracking ability. I think he's a top 50 player in this class strictly based on his film. But there are 2 major red flags with him that I just can't feel comfortable even giving him a grade and stacking him up against these top 10 receivers in this list. Number 1 is the medicals. The last 2 years, that ankle has kept him off the field. How well do the doctors think that's going to hold up? That is information I don't have access to. Number 2 is this weird ego struggle he's had with Coach Kelly at LSU. Is he coachable? Is he going to be available mentally? That is something that the interviews at the Combine are going to be so important, and another thing I don't have access to. So a unique prospect with a really high upside, once upon a time could have been the number 1 receiver in this class. It just didn't work out for him at LSU, and I've got anything from a 2nd to a 5th round grade right now on Keyshawn Butte. I'm just not comfortable ranking him stacked up against this group. He's a total wild card, and it's going to come down to these teams making a decision on him. Guys, if you enjoy my draft analysis and you want even more content, you can get exclusive draft content on my Patreon. That is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. Right now, we've got film breakdowns up of Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud. We're going to have team-specific 7-round mock drafts for all 32 teams there on Patreon come April. And probably the biggest thing, you will get access to my full player rankings. If there's any other receivers that I didn't mention in this video and you want to know my thoughts and opinions on, well, it'll all be there written up on my draft board on Patreon. We've got 19 receivers done right now. I think that number will triple by the time the draft gets here, and that's just receivers. Every year we have between 350 and 400 players fully evaluated and ranked over there on the draft board on Patreon. So if you want access to exclusive draft content, you want to support my channel financially, head over to patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. I really appreciate it, let alone the content. The support is huge. I would not be able to do this on YouTube without my amazing supporters on Patreon. All right, let's get to number 6, and this is a polarizing player to me, Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. I've seen him go as early as number 12 in mock drafts. For me, I've got him more as a round 2 player. So Hyatt is the fastest probably player in this draft, certainly receiver. He has legit elite speed. I think he has a very good chance of clearing 4.3 and running something in the 4.2s, and it shows on tape. He's also got pretty solid hands. He's got decent technique in his routes. He's got good foot speed. He can stop on a dime on hitch routes, which is a really nice tool for him to have because D-backs are going to play off of him quite a bit. And if he can turn on a dime and work with a good quarterback to be in time on those hitch routes, that's good to have. So he's not like, Anthony Schwartz coming out of Auburn, but he's also not Henry Ruggs either. And for a couple reasons. Number 1, they run a really weird system at Tennessee with this stack spread offense. And it guaranteed that Jalen Hyatt was going to be seeing free releases time and time again. And sometimes you worry about that, sometimes you don't. With Hyatt, he wasn't able to go to the Senior Bowl or any of these events to show what he can do against real press coverage. And on film, he had, I think, 18 snaps in his final year against press coverage, only 1 catch against press coverage. And it's always tough to try to predict, how's that going to happen at the next level? You'd rather at least see it and know that he can't do it so that you can check that box. We just literally do not know what he's going to look like against press coverage. But I will say there's 2 big things that I'm worried about. Number 1, he's not like even Dell or Jaden Reed, where they're smaller guys, so it's harder to kind of get your jam on him. He's a taller guy, but he's equally lanky and is equally easily redirected as those other guys. So he's a bigger target for corners to get their hands on, slow him down. But he also is a really slow starter. He doesn't separate early in his routes. And when you're talking about trying to stack press coverage at the next level, that requires acceleration just as much as it does speed. So he's a really tough evaluation. I think he has real bust potential. I do. We've seen guys get drafted off of speed and it just not translate at the next level. He's also someone that saw almost no contested catch opportunities because he's running in all of this free space at Tennessee. So he's not really put on tape how well he's going to elevate and deal with contact at the catch point. So many question marks with him. For me to draft a guy like that at 12 just because he's fast and just because they found a perfect use for him in a unique college offense, it's tough. If you plugged him into Kansas City or LA late in the first, sure. But to expect him to be Henry Ruggs, who had legit stop-start ability that Jalen Hyatt just does not have, and refined examples of how he can handle press and a lot more to his game, it's just a different level of prospect. So to me, I do see a similar comp to Quez Watkins, who's a solid player for the Eagles. He can run fast and has decent hands, but someone that does struggle with contact and doesn't always separate against man coverage. And I think a good kind of comp for him is someone like Mike Wallace, who was an incredible deep threat with low 4.3 speed in the NFL for a long time. I don't think he's quite Deshaun Jackson because he doesn't have the stop-start ability as Deshaun Jackson. So an interesting player. I think I'm a little bit lower on Hyatt than consensus, but I see the upside as a deep threat and in certain situations can certainly understand the appeal as well. Okay, next up, the number 5 receiver is Josh Downs out of North Carolina. Another smaller receiver. You're starting to see that trend here and what might make a guy like Michael Wilson more valuable because you can get that full size. But with Josh Downs, a little bit less to say. I mean, he's an incredibly quick player. I think he has elite foot speed and agility. I think his route running is exceptional, especially for a 21-year-old, especially as you get down into the red zone. His ability to run whip routes and, little shoulder fakes, then run a fade. He loses guys down in the red zone. And it goes to show that you don't have to be 6'4" down there. It's more about separation down in the red zone. So he's going to be a threat down there. Reminds me a lot of Hunter Renfrow in that way. He's awesome after the catch, super instinctive, and incredibly reliable hands. Might have the most reliable pair of hands in this draft class. He had just 3 drops on 116 targets in 2022. I don't think he's quite as fast as Tank Dell or as Zay Flowers, as we're going to see here, but he can threaten as a deep threat, and he tracks the deep ball pretty well. He reminds me a lot of Elijah Moore coming out of Ole Miss. I think I like him a little bit more than Elijah out of Ole Miss, but a similar thing where, I think he needs to go to a situation where they can get him in space, get him lined up in a way that he's not going to face a lot of big physical corners, because at his size, he will get redirected and slowed down in his route down the field. And he's not some crazy contested catch guy. But there's so much to like in Josh Downs. I think he's a top 35 to 40 player in this draft, just like Elijah Moore was. If you take him in the first round, I'm totally fine with it. And you kind of know exactly what you're getting in him. It's just a matter of, is that size going to be a problem for him at the next level as he makes that transition? And I think in the right situation, he can be a really impactful, second or third receiver on your offense. Then we've got Zay Flowers, who has a lot of similarities to Josh Downs. I think if you miss out on one, you can go with the other one, and they can wear similar hats. But I will say, I think where Zay Flowers is a little bit different is I think he's a little bit better as a deep threat. I think he's got a little bit more deep speed. He's got a little bit more thickness to him to deal with some of that physical contact against these bigger corners. It's still going to be an issue for him, but I don't think it's quite as bad with Zay Flowers as it is with Josh Downs. I also think he has remarkable deep route running ability. Same thing we said about Jaden Reed with those hezzy steps, the misdirection. He also shows double moves where he's faking, dig routes and then whipping back up on the corner or on the post. he can do a lot of stuff to lose you vertically. Excellent in the short game, similarly to Josh Downs, great in the red zone, losing guys in short areas, great after the catch. So much to like in Zay Flowers. And to me, I compare him to Brandon Cooks, which again is a little bit of a step up from Josh Downs, but I think he's actually a shiftier version of Brandon Cooks, because Brandon Cooks quietly isn't that good at making guys miss. Zay Flowers is an absolute natural. Some have pointed out as well that the way he moves and tracks the deep ball in a lot of ways is Antonio Brown-esque. I wasn't going to go quite that far, but I do see it. So I love Zay Flowers. Got to see him at the Shrine Bowl in Vegas in person, and he was just on a different playing field than the rest of the players out there, and those were real NFL prospects that he was just ditching in the dirt. So I love Zay Flowers. I definitely see him as someone you can take in the first round. Top 20 might be a little bit rich, but I could probably be convinced of it. And another play that I think you just kind of know what you're getting with some minor size concerns on top of everything. All right, my number 3 receiver, it doesn't get me actually as excited as our last two guys, but that's Jackson Smith-Njigba. Talk about knowing what you're getting. He's one of the highest floor players in this entire draft. I mean, it's similar to a good running back. You just know what he's going to do. He's got reliable hands. He's tough after the catch. He's a smart player. He knows how to sit down in zones. I was a little bit underwhelmed by his route running. There was so much space in that Ohio State offense. I think a lot of times he knew that he could round his routes, and it was more about, I just got to get to this space on time. And there wasn't really anyone around him because they're so focused on everybody else there. When he was back playing in 2021 with Olave and Garrett Wilson, he's like, well, I just got to get to this spot 10 yards down the field. I'm going to be wide open. So I think he shows enough polish in the rest of his game that when forced to do so, he's going to be a better route runner, but that's still something he's going to have to develop. I think there was flashes as far as what he can offer against press coverage. He really didn't see a lot of it at Ohio State, but on small occasions he did and showed what you want to see from a receiver, to have that release package and the quick feet to get off of press. A really impressive contested catch guy. He's no twig. He's got decent height. If you're running slot fades with this guy, that's going to be a killer because he can track the ball. He's got great body control. He's got enough length to attack the football. And that's all of that I just said is Amon-Ra St. Brown in a nutshell. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown is the best slot receiver in the NFL. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba can be that if he has the same work ethic and attention to detail. I think it's very possible. He's also got to stay healthy. Missed his final season due to injury, but again, super safe player, day one starter in the slot with the potential to be one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. I don't think he's got great long speed. I don't think he's going to be a ball winner on the outside. I think, I'm trying to be respectful here, the Justin Jefferson comparisons don't do it for me. I love Justin Jefferson. Jefferson had a year playing on the outside. He had 4.4 speed, and there was a real skill set there to say he can translate as an outside receiver. I would not say the same about Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think just like Amon-Ra St. Brown, he is a slot-only receiver, but he can be one of the best slot guys in the NFL. Oh, and he has the same thing Amon-Ra St. Brown has, although maybe at 90%, is that elite 0 to 60 acceleration, which is even more important than speed as a slot receiver. If he gets a linebacker or a safety on him, they just can't close that space, those tight windows, in the time that he's able to peel away. So I love that in Jackson Smith-Njigba. All right, my number 2 wide receiver was my number 1 receiver for a while until I got some more footage on Quentin Johnston over the last week, and I had to change it. We'll get into that. But Jordan Addison out of USC. I fell in love with Addison when he was at Pitt. You guys know I was relatively high on Kenny Pickett, considering everyone kind of hated him. And I became very familiar with Jordan Addison because he was incredible at Pittsburgh. At USC, he wasn't quite the same guy, but I do think the flashes were there, that he's still that dynamic, highlight reel waiting to happen. He's not the biggest guy. He's actually really slender, and he is going to deal with some of those issues we've talked about where he can get banged in his routes and redirected and taken out of plays. he's got good release. More often than not, he can beat press coverage, but there are plays that really good press corners can get up inside his chest and delete him from the play to the point where sometimes he ends up on the turf. So, like, in general, I like his release, but if he's going up against, like, Sauce Gardner, and maybe we saw that matchup last year, I don't know, but NFL version of Sauce Gardner, how well is that going to work out for him? I think there's some question marks there. But overall, super refined player, excellent route runner, great athlete. He doesn't have ridiculous speed. I think he runs mid 4.4s, which is pretty good. But he's not going to peel away and be this elite deep threat at the next level. He's going to win with polish in his routes. He's going to win with craft at the catch point, run after the catch. So I really like him. I say he's a smaller Stephon Diggs. How much does that limit his upside from being a true number one? I don't know, but I feel very good that he can be a dominant number two receiver in the NFL and is a day one starter. I think the highest impact for any perimeter receiver in this draft. And then my number one wide receiver, Quentin Johnston out of TCU. It took a little bit of warming up, but I'm there now that I've gotten some more All-22 and really have gotten to take a better look at his routes and the way he moves. Let me put it this way. Quentin Johnston, I think he ended up with like 1,000 yards. He could have had 1,800 if Max Duggan knew where to go with the football. I know he's a pro prospect, but there were so many times on tape where I was like, well, he torched that guy off the line of scrimmage, or, oh, he just came wide open on a post and that safety doesn't have the speed to keep up with him, or that backside slant, that backside dig, that backside hitch. He's wide open. Why are we not getting the ball in the hands of our best playmaker? Horned Frogs. They're a good program. I'm not trying to slam them, but they could have really cranked up Quentin Johnston's draft stock. So it's all on film. An NFL team's going to see that, and I think they can put that to better use at the next level. I don't think that's crazy to say. The most important two things with me for Quentin Johnston, because there's a lot to like, right? Number one is his acceleration is absolutely legit. A lot of these big guys, even like T. Higgins, for example, or Mike Williams, they don't get to that top speed out of their stance like 0 to 60 like that. Quentin Johnston does. And he has rapid feet and refined release technique. So trying to press this guy and prevent him from stacking you vertically over the top is going to be incredibly difficult. He might be one of the most dangerous pro prospects as far as like just getting off the line and running a go ball. Now, his speed is good, borderline great. I think that's going to be big for him. If he can run what I think he's capable of with that acceleration and the long striding speed that he has and clear 4.4 and get something in the 4.3s, I think you're talking about a top 10 pick for Quentin Johnston. If he's more of a 4.4 speed guy, I think you can maybe have a little bit more reservations about just how freaky he is, because he's very quick, he accelerates quickly, but if that long speed isn't also elite, it just, it takes the top off of his ceiling a little bit. One more pro, and then I want to talk about some issues with him. He's a really good route runner. That was another huge thing that stood out to me when I got more of his All-22. He's just got refined footwork, quick feet. He can stop on a dime on hitch routes. If he's running a dig, he doesn't waste any momentum, doesn't lose any momentum. It's really impressive. Now, if he's trying to round and stop and maybe not necessarily stop and start, but the real change of direction ability, you kind of want to keep him on one line or on a hitch route. But for the most part, his quickness, his ability to separate is truly special. Now, the big issue with Quentin Johnston that just leaves so much to be desired is the physicality. He plays more like you would expect maybe Jordan Addison or Josh Downs to play with, honestly. He doesn't high point the ball very well, at least consistently. He doesn't box out corners like he could with his size. He doesn't handle just arm contact at the catch point. He had just kind of a mediocre contested catch reel as far as his college tape is concerned. So can he improve that aspect of his position? Because if you're 6'4", that's just something to his game that he's not putting to its best advantage. So he's an interesting player. He actually reminds me a lot of Demaryius Thomas, who for a while was not this incredible contested catch receiver, but crazy size and speed, and a guy that if you threw a bubble screen to, he can make a guy miss, and he's gone to the house. That reminds me a lot of Quentin Johnston, or throw a crosser or a drag. Think of the similarities between Demaryius Thomas catching that ball from Tebow and beating the Steelers in overtime compared to Quentin Johnston's big touchdown against Michigan. Very similar types of skill sets. So he is my number one wide receiver. I don't think he's a surefire top 10 guy, but I am really impressed by him. If he can just improve some of the contested catch stuff, you're getting a true elite X wide receiver someday in Quentin Johnston. So there you go. There are my top 10 wide receivers. We definitely got a little bit long, but I'd rather be thorough, really cover these guys. Again, I will have an updated list in March, so make sure you're subscribed. If you enjoy my draft content, please do check out the Patreon. If nothing else, please do hit that like button. Drop a comment down below. Who do you think got snubbed? What do you think of my ordering here? Who are your top 10 wide receivers? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.